Hello, everyone. Today we'll continue talking about Plato's Gorgias. Last time we saw a Socrates' main argument for why tyrants and orators that bring about tyrants are not really powerful and are not really happy. And here is Plato's response to that. He's very puzzled. He doesn't know what's wrong with the argument. He's not quite happy with the conclusion. Here's what he says. Really, Socrates, as if you wouldn't welcome being in a position to do what you see fit in the city rather than not, as if you wouldn't be envious whenever you'll see anyone putting to death some person he saw fit, or confiscating his property, or tying up. Notice that here Plotus is kind of giving up the game of reasoning, of thinking, and engaging with Socrates. He does not address the argument at all. He just does not know what's wrong with it. He just thinks like he's being tricked by Socrates' reasoning or something, and he makes a fallacious move. He goes on to say, yeah, no one believes you. Not even you believe yourself. You wouldn't choose the conclusion of your own arguments. He goes on to restate his position. And Socrates does not, accept it. It's like, oh, wait a minute. You mean someone who uses power justly or unjustly, right? For Socrates, it matters whether power is good depends on whether it's power for doing something just, and it is merely instrumentally good. It's the justice that is really good. And if it's unjust, then the power itself is not valuable. In fact, the opposite, it just makes you a worse person. It makes you vicious. It makes you less happy, makes you miserable. So it's all about whether or not it's power for good or for bad. I mean, that's what distinguishes it being good or bad power, and whether it be conducive to your happiness. So which one is it, says Socrates, just or unjust? And again, Plotus, whichever it is, one would envy someone who has power, even if it's power for injustice, claims Plotus. And so he says, hush, hush, Polus. What for? Because you're not supposed to envy the unenviable or the miserable. You're supposed to pity them. Uh, Socrates is pointing out that Plotus' use of envy is misguided. The appropriate object of envy, if there is an appropriate object, is he who's doing something, who's doing well. If someone's miserable, if you envy them, there's something wrong with your envy too. So what Socrates is saying, and what Plotus is saying about Socrates being envious of those who have power, uh, Socrates is going to claim, if someone is envious of those who have power, they don't even understand what envy is. They're misusing envy as well. Envy is a guide to goodness, and shame is a guide to goodness, and they indicate what's good and what is bad. And someone who's envious of things that are bad, they don't know how to envy. And Socrates continues, yes, the one who puts someone to death unjustly is miserable. If you have the power to kill someone, you kill them unjustly. You are being miserable. Of course, they're miserable because you killed them, but you're miserable. And he's to be pitied besides. So the unjust person is miserable and to be pitied. It is not envy, but pity that is the appropriate emotional response towards he who is miserable because they're doing injustice. But the one who does so justly isn't to be envied either. In other words, if someone has the power to kill others justly, then perhaps they should use the power and to go and kill other people justly. But that's not a great thing either. That's not something to be envied either. That's at best, a necessary evil. Someone has to do the righteous killing, and thankfully there are people to do it. Best case scenario, but it's not to be envied either. But it continues. Surely the one who's put to death unjustly is the one who's both to be pitied and miserable. You're less happy if you're the subject of injustice than you are if you are the one who's doing the injustice. It's not merely that people would prefer to be the ones that do injustice unto others, but the reason why people would prefer to be the ones that do injustice unto others instead of receiving it is because they would be happier by being unjust than by being the objects of injustice, right? That's at the heart of the debate here, and that's something that's not quite been explicitly addressed. And now Plato is going to Socrates is going to explicitly address it. And the first thing he says is that less so than the one putting him to death, and less even so than the one who's justly put to death. So to be unjust is to be miserable, and to be pitied, and to be unjust and get away with an injustice, that is, never get punished for it, is even more miserable than not. And they're both the one who does injustice and gets punished, and the one who does injustice and gets away with it. They're both more miserable than he who receives the injustice and the one who suffers the injustice, claims Socrates. So that's a pretty grand claim as well. It's very counterintuitive. Most people would not choose, not prefer that. And yet Socrates claims, if you think about it, that is the wise decision. That is the wise way of thinking. That's the virtuous way of thinking. So that's going to be the new conclusion to be looked for. And here's Socrates' main argument for those two great claims. So he's going to use shame as a way of illustrating his conclusion. So here is the kind of the first premise that he thinks is true by virtue of definition. That's just what the words mean. Something is shameful if it is bad, and something is admirable if it is good. If you do something good, then admiration is the right response to that thing. If you do something bad, then being ashamed is the right response to that. So shame, the proper object of shame, is the bad. The proper object of admiration is the good. That there's a tight connection there. Furthermore, shame comes in degrees. Some things are more shameful than others, and those degrees also track degrees of goodness or badness. A is more shameful than B if A is worse or more bad than B. If you do something that's a little bad, you should be a little bit ashamed. If you do something that is horribly bad, then you should be even more ashamed. And the reason why you should be more ashamed is that precisely because the thing you did is even more bad, right? So the badness of your actions, of your character, kind of indicates how strong the shame should be. Shame is appropriate when the thing you do or are is something bad. And the worse it is, the more shame there should be, right? That's the appropriate relationship between shame and bad, in degrees of shameness and degrees of badness. And here's an important observation by Socrates. It is more shameful to do something unjust than to suffer it. Let's use the example of robbing a car. Suppose that you park your car outside of your house, and then you wake up in the morning to go to work, and then you realize your car is gone. Someone stole your your car. Someone has perpetuated injustice towards you, right? You're the sufferer of the injustice of your car being stolen. Should you be ashamed of that? Um, Socrates says, well, probably not at all. Like, you didn't do anything bad, right? Someone did it. But now suppose that instead of you being the one whose car has been stolen, you're caught stealing someone's car. I mean, you're the one who's trying to steal it, and you're caught in the moment. You're stealing someone's car. Should you be ashamed of that? Well, of course, right? You're doing something bad. You're stealing someone's car, so you should be ashamed of that. So the it is more shameful to be caught doing something unjust than it is to find yourself the object of something of injustice. That's all we need, right? From these three premises, this crucial conclusion follows. Therefore, it is worse to do something unjust than it is to suffer it. It is more shameful to do something unjust, to be caught doing something unjust, than it is to find yourself people realizing that you were the object of injustice. But notice what premise 2 says. Something is more shameful than something else if the first thing is worse or more bad than the other thing. So from this, it follows that it is more bad or worse to do injustice than it is to suffer injustice. And because of Plato's connection of that which is good for you is what makes you happy, and that which is bad for you is what makes you miserable, claim number 4 just gives you that you're more miserable if you're unjust than you would be if you were the recipient of or the one who suffered injustice. It's not you're going to be happy by suffering injustice. You'd be miserable, but not as miserable as the one who does injustice. And shame tracks that. So that's the first main thesis. Let's go for the second main thesis. To be justly punished for doing injustice is itself just. So you're caught stealing the car. You should be ashamed, right? Shame is the appropriate response because it is bad. And here's the next claim. Just punishment, to be punished justly, and then for you having done something unjust, namely stealing the car, is itself just. So when the police catches you and returns the car to the rightful owner and gives you a fee or whatever your legal penalties, that's you're being set right. You're the act being done upon you is itself just. Crucial premise number 6: to treat someone justly is to do them good, to kind of straighten out their soul, to straighten out their personality, to put them in the right path, or at least try to put them in the right path. So when someone's punishing you justly, they're doing something to you which is good, namely trying to make your soul better, trying to make you more virtuous. Um, so therefore, that's the second conclusion. To justly punish someone for having done something unjust, yeah, that's a condition for justice, is doing them something good. So you're being treated well when you're being justly punished for doing something unjust. Um, to have something good done to you is better than not, obviously. And now you get the very explicit mention of the thesis that give rise to laughter and Polis part. Therefore, and this is a conclusion, it is better to be justly punished for having done something unjust than not to be justly punished. If you're not justly punished, you get away with a car, you have a car, but you're more vicious. You did something wrong to yourself. You wronged yourself. And you get that was not set right by the punishment, was not attempted to be set right by the punishment. So you're more miserable, you're worse off, you're more bad by getting away with a crime than by having a consequence. And you will continue down the path of crime more likely. So you could be going in the wrong direction. Um, Again, Polis is not quite, he doesn't know how to respond to the argument. And all of the premises seem obviously true. The conclusion follows. It's hard to reason with Socrates. Socrates is so smart, but he's not quite sure what they lay. And he tries this something else. Here's what Polis tries. Surely there's something bad about being punished, right? Like to be punished is not merely to be set up in the right way, to be like to be it's not merely healing the soul for justice. Typically, punishment involves hurting you, taking your liberty, taking your money, taking putting you in prison. Something bad is being done to you when you're being punished. Why are we ignoring that? Like, why is this not part of the argument? Claims Polis. And here, Socrates brings to the fore some crucial claims about the nature of reality that make sense of what he's saying. What he's saying. Uh, the good or excellence that which makes this the good for the soul is virtue. So the excellence of the soul is virtue. When the soul is more virtuous, it is a better soul. It kind of it develops, it grows, it flourishes, it becomes a better version of itself. It is virtue that makes the soul be a better soul. Virtue and wisdom. And the corruption of the bad, that which makes it worse off, that which is bad for the soul, is vice and ignorance. So what is good for the soul is to be virtuous. What is uh, bad for the soul is to, what corrupts the soul is vice. So that's a crucial claim. Um, contrast, what is good for the body, what is excellent for the body is health. A good body is a body that is a healthy body. And the corruption of the body is something like disease or illness. A good body, what is good for the body is for it to be healthy. What is bad is for it to be diseased. Um, Crucially, unjustly punished inflicts suffering on the body, and it is good for the soul. So when someone puts you to prison or something, when there's a punishment, the punishment is a corporal punishment. They hurt your body, right? They take your liberty, they take your stuff. So when someone punishes you, the body is worse off. Your body is worse off. That is the thing that Polus is pointing to. Hey, this is a real thing. But Socrates claims, yeah, that's fine. Like your body's worse off by the punishment. However, your soul is better off because the wickedness has received its due rewards. And having its due kind of rewards for punishment, for having done something wrong, which is punishment, makes the soul better. Crucially, the soul is more noble or superior than the body. So what's happening in punishment, claims Socrates, is that when you do something wrong, you hurt your own soul, you corrupt your own soul by becoming vicious. Then the punishment makes your soul better by trying to rectify it, and it hurts the body. The punishment hurts your body but betters your soul. And because the soul is better than the body, you should take the deal. That's a good deal to take. You're all things considered better off because the better part of you, the more noble part of you, namely your soul, is better off. You gain more virtue, even though your body is, deprived from liberty for a while or something. You're stuck in a cell. Your body is worse off, but your soul is better off. That's why being justly punished is all things considered better for you, because it's better for your soul, even though it's bad for your body. And he actually provides us a cool argument for the claim that soul is better than or more superior than the body. The first premise is the same premise from the previous argument. Something is shameful if it is bad and admirable if it is good. The second premise is also the same premise from the previous argument. A is more shameful than B if A is worse or more bad than B, right? So it's the first connection between goodness and badness and the connection with the good life, and shame as tracking the goodness and badness. Uh, so here is the crucial premise for the new argument. It is more shameful for the soul to be corrupted than for the body to be corrupted. If you fall ill and your body gets a little bit deformed, should you be ashamed of that? Well, probably not. I mean, maybe beauty is a source of like admiration, in which case, not beautiful will be a source of shame. But anyway, it's not much, right? If your body is a little bit corrupted, you shouldn't feel as ashamed as, say, if you're caught stealing a car or doing something wrong. It is more shameful to corrupt your soul than it is to corrupt your body. Like if you get an accident or something, right? You get a disease. Being ashamed of that is not quite the right response. If you feel ashamed of it, or at least very ashamed of it, some chances are you're not using shame correctly. You're not shaming yourself in the right way. You should, however, be ashamed if you do something vicious, if you're unjust, if you're, a member of the KKK and you're supporting white supremacy. You should be ashamed of that. You're corrupting your soul and you're hurting people, right? Stop hurting people. But that is much more shameful to be a member of the KKK than it is for your body to, undergo something bad. Um, that's all we need, right? Like that premise number three, together with one and two, give you that the body is worse or less valuable than the soul. Why? Because when the body is corrupted, it is less shameful than it is when the soul is corrupted. And again, premise number two, A is more shameful than B only if A is worse than B. So the body is worse or less valuable than the soul. And you get that directly from the claims about shame. Therefore, corrupting the soul, engaging in acts of vicious or ignorant acts is the worst and more shameful thing of all. Why? Because you only have your body and your soul, and to hurt or corrupt your soul is worse than hurting or corrupting your body. So the worst thing you can do to yourself is engage in injustice or act ignorantly. And that's the main conclusion, right? That's the main conclusion from Socrates. And again, it is a conclusion. He's not just like preaching and hoping that you have faith in what he says. He's walking you through the nature of shame and its connection with goodness. And those very grand conclusions are conclusions of arguments. So let's go back to the whole story with the tyrant. The tyrant who perpetuates injustices and seeks to escape punishment is like the person with an ill body who seeks to escape the doctor because he does not like to undergo the treatment. The treatment is going to hurt the body, but it's going to heal the soul. The tyrant is as ignorant of what is truly good for the soul as this ill person is ignorant of what is good for the body. Think of someone who has an illness, a curable illness, but the treatment is a bit unpleasant, and who says, "Oh, I don't really want to go to the doctor. I don't like the treatment. I'm just going to continue on." That's to act in an ignorant way. That's to act with not really understanding what is good for the body, right? You're hurting the body. The same can be said for the perpetuator of injustice. They want to keep on getting away with injustice, doing more injustice, because they don't understand what is good for them. What is good for them is not vice. Vice corrupts what is best in them, namely their soul. So here's the last of Socrates. And if he or anyone else who cares about him acts unjustly, does something wrong, he should voluntarily go to the place where he'll pay his due as soon as possible, like going to the doctor. He should go to the judge as though he were going to a doctor, anxious that the disease of injustice shouldn't be protected and cause his soul to fester incurably. Um, the good life is doing that which is good for you. What is good for you is for the body health, for the soul virtue and knowledge and wisdom. And to do the opposite of that, what hurts you and does not make you happy, is to hurt your body or to hurt your soul with injustice. That's the heart of Socrates. I'll stop here. I'll see you next time. Bye.